I'm back with Jerry Meral, and we're talking about early days on the Stanislaus River. We're now going to cover the Prop 17 adventure. So you went in the early 70s from this massive petition gathering campaign that brought 100,000 signatures out. Clearly, the Stanislaus touched a nerve for people. And you were talking before about the idea of the initiative and where that came from. Tell us a little bit about what that experience was.
Oh, well, I can just repeat. The idea came up on a ride on the skunk train in sort of early or mid 1973, just because the Coastal Initiative had been so successful. And so, since I was working for the Environmental Defense Fund, I had to do all that initiative stuff pretty much on my own time. I wouldn't say I never thought about it at the office, let's say, but Tom Graff and I, we put our heads together at times. And so the timeline had to be followed. You had to file a certain petition or, statement with the state to say you're going to gather signatures and get title and summary. Now, one of the things that helped was that Tom's good friend Dan Lowenstein was at the Secretary of State's office with some guy named Jerry Brown. I forget exactly who he was. And so,
who was Secretary of State
at the time. Secretary of State at the time. And so we got good cooperation from the Secretary's office in terms of our title and summary and some adventures we had with misspellings and stuff like that. So anyway, we got our title and summary and had to go out and collect signatures. And that was a big mobilization effort, of course, of river guides and Sierra Club and just all kinds of people. And Dennis Vieira, our signature coordinator, sort of tried to keep them all together, herding river guides, you can imagine. But and we did have a little bit of paid signature gathering because we really didn't know if we could do it, but we ended up pretty much doing it without any paid signature gathering. So there are so many stories about that signature campaign. In those days, you had to put down the precinct number of each voter. That was abolished by Prop 9 later on that Jerry Brown actually ran, although it was Ed, what's his name, Kupel. So to do that, you get the signatures, and then Vladimir Kovalek and other river outfitters. Vladimir was a high school teacher. Oh no, it was Lauren. It was Lauren. He was a high school teacher, so he brought busloads of high school kids to L.A. to sit around the pool of one of our supporters and hand write in all of the precinct numbers on all these various thousands and thousands of signatures. And it was just a huge volunteer effort. It was just astounding, and people would just go out and spend hours and hours and hours. And of course, a lot of the people that we know now got involved through the Mark Dubois and Graciela and so on, got involved even before that, but especially during the campaign.
So when did Rob Coughlin and Roanoke come in? Did they come in once the initiative qualified?
Oh, no. We brought them in quite early because we knew we needed some professional help on campaigns. And they had a relatively new company called Roanoke, get it?
Rob and Oak.
Yeah. And so it's called Roanoke. You'd see at the bottom of a teacup when you get their cup. So we brought them in.
How did you even come across them?
I can't remember. Rob might be able to tell you, but someone referred us to them because we knew we needed that help. In those days, there were very few professional campaigns. There was Whitaker and Baxter that had run the campaign against the Coastal Initiative, but we weren't going to hire them. We didn't have the money anyway. And these guys, Rob and Dave, they were pretty hungry and wanted to do a campaign. So it was. They did a professional job. Overall, it was so much different than what we would do today. Just, I don't want to say amateurish. For the day, it was relatively professional. But today, we look back and go, you did what?
Well, when we talk about the campaign, I recall, and there are pictures of this on the StanislausRiver.org website, of making bed sheet posters with spray paint and stencils and hanging them over freeway overpasses.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things we did, which I love to do, is sniping. That is, you take your campaign, Yes on 17, and you go out in the dead of night and go post it up somewhere. And so I and someone else, it wasn't you, but somebody else, can't remember who it was, we were out sniping one night, out near Kaiser actually, and we had a ladder, we were putting it up on telephone poles, and a cops came by and busted us. And we, what are you guys doing? Yeah, take that down and get the hell out of here.
There's another story about that happened in L.A. and they were doing the same thing. The cops came by and they go, and which way is which? meaning yes on 17, no on 17, and
Yeah.
they said then they just left them alone, and they went on to do it.
One of the things we did during the campaign was, the whole story was, the Wild River hoax. And so I wanted a bill put into the legislation, or at least a resolution denouncing the other side's campaign. And with a lot of effort, we got Senator John Nedgerly to actually do a press conference denouncing the other side for running such a deceptive campaign.
This was the no on 17,
Yeah.
claiming to save the river by just confusing everybody.
Yeah,
So
and
that
also
everybody
to
would
stop the
know.
Wild River hoax, they had pictures of the power plant at Camp 9, and it's not really a river,
Yeah, and the conundrum, of course, being that you had to vote yes to save the river, whereas no would mean stopping the dam, and it was very confusing. So during the campaign, Jerry Brown decided he was running for governor, and he was going to come out and endorse Prop 17. How did that come about?
Well, because when Jerry Brown decided to run, which was like back in '73, Tom Graff was asked to organize a group of environmentalists to brief Jerry Brown on environmental policy. And that was because his friend, his college friend from, was it Harvard or Yale? Harvard, I think, Yale Law School, was working for Jerry Brown. And so they made that connection. And so this was organized at Jerry Brown's house at Tom Graff's house up in Oakland. Or no, wait a minute. Yeah, I think he lived in Berkeley.
Berkeley at
actually.
that
Yeah,
time.
Berkeley. And so Brown shows up with Lowenstein, and I was asked to do water. Bob Vanden Bosch from UC Berkeley, a famous professor, was asked to do pesticides. We had someone, I can't remember, on air quality. We had 4 or 5 people. It was a fairly small group, less than 10 people. So I was asked to go first and start talking about water. That was a terrible mistake because Jerry Brown had this huge family legacy of the State Water Project, and he had seen the whole water.
His father, the previous governor, had been
Right.
instrumental in the State Water Project.
Right. Pat Brown had invented the State Water, well, not invented, but pushed the State Water Project. And Jerry Brown remembered sitting up at night with Pat Brown waiting to see if the thing had passed. It passed by like 0.1% in 1960. So Jerry Brown had this enormous legacy of water. And we had like 2 or 3 hours reserved, and most of the time was spent on water, which was very frustrating to the other 4 briefers who were sitting around going, do we ever get to talk? Because Brown, I wanted to stop. Brown would not shut up.
Yeah.
And so we spent half the time or more talking about water. And so, of course, we talked about the Stanislaus. And so I think that may have been his first exposure to it. And then we invited him to go on the raft trip that some guy led guided the raft. I forget who that was exactly, but it was Larry.
That would be me.
And it was a great trip. We had about 5,000 CFS. It was fairly high. And Brown went down the river as part of a tour of the gold country. And so
this was during the campaign. His campaign
Right.
showed up in a big bus, and we arranged for him to go down the river.
And so the paddling crew was me and Rob Coughlin in front, Jerry Brown and Bill Boyarsky, the famous political reporter for the LA Times, and back. And let's just say their paddling abilities at one point became less than desirable, and Larry almost got sucked back into a hole that he never would have gotten out of. But it was a great trip. At the end of the trip, we're at Camp 9, no, we're at Paris Ferry Bridge, and Brown gets off the river. He's wearing shorts and a paddling jacket, and there's a bunch of Hell's Angels there. And he goes up to the Hell's Angels and immediately says, "Hi, I'm Jerry Brown. I'm running for governor." Then he goes off to an old-time political event in Jackson with a bunch of old cigar-smoking Pauls, and Boyarsky writes it up as the new politics on the river, the old politics in the Democratic Hall in Jackson. It was just a great event.
Yeah, that was. We'll do a separate piece at some point on that whole river trip story because it was. I'd been managing all the raft trips for the campaign and press trips and all, and we had heard from Jerry Brown that he wanted to go down in 2 hours, and we said we can't do that. And some of the guys said, "Well, we think we can do it," so we sent them down with a boat and a frame tied on backwards. They rowed down full power the whole way through. They got down in 2 hours. And we gave him a 6-pack, said, "Okay, you guys did it." We still weren't convinced that we could do it. And then Jerry Brown, of course, at the put-in, talked himself onto the paddle raft, which I was supposed to run as color for the photographers. And Jerry Meral was up on the bank waving his hands when Jerry walked down saying, "Who's going in here?" He said, "No, no, no." And anyway, it was quite the story. But he did stop paddling, and I was mostly interested in talking to the LA Times reporter.
Right.
It was a surreal trip.
It was great.
Any other kind of recollections about the Prop 17 campaign? Anything that stands out as...
Well, the gall of the campaign is what really impresses anyone who reads about it. Here is a dam that's about half constructed. Today it would be, they've already invested like $1 billion today dollars, right? This thing is gigantic. And we're going to, and we're going to talk the federal government into abandoning it, tearing it down, because you couldn't just leave it there, tearing it down and making it a wild river. And you look at it now and you go, how could that even work? And also the Corps of Engineers, when asked, would you agree if this passed to stop working on the dam? They would not say yes. They wouldn't exactly say no. They didn't want to look too arrogant. But the bottom line is Congress had ordered them to do it, and nothing the state of California could do in law could overturn a congressional decision. Congress would have had to intervene. And so I've told people since then, this is a bizarre thing to say, but even though it was terrible to lose the campaign and very disappointing, because we came pretty close, we got 47% or something like that, so it was remarkable.
And remarkably outspent.
Oh yeah, the spending was, I think if people had understood exactly what it did, it would have passed.
Absolutely.
They were confused by the campaign. So, but had it passed, and had the federal government goes, who cares, we're building the dam, which they could have done, I think it would have been devastating to the volunteers, and probably would have undermined or even forestalled the whole campaign to save the Tuolumne. People might have gone, why should I work on trying to save the Tuolumne when we passed this thing on Prop 17 and then it didn't work? So who knows what the benefits or costs are and whether in fact the dam would have stopped, but I don't know that we could have saved the Tuolumne had it passed and they kept building the dam. So who knows? Also, losing causes sometimes are more inspirational, in some ways. People are always happy to win, but they remember the Stanislaus campaign. And David Gaines, I'm trying to think what year that was, 76 or 75 even, David Gaines, who started the Mono Lake Committee, told me he... what did he say exactly? Anyway, he started the Mono Lake Committee because of the Friends of the River Stanislaus campaign. That's the gist of what he said. And I've had other people come up and say, "Oh, we did this because
There's a lot to be demonstrated that a lot of people came out of the Prop 17 campaign into very key environmental positions. I mean, my own role, frankly, was very influenced by that, but lots of others as well. And so it had a legacy effect far beyond the specifics of what happened there.
I will say that was 74, so we're coming up on the 50th anniversary, and look, we're still talking about it.